The mockery begins. The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wide and high, filled with voices from hundreds of species who had come to witness the quarterly review of military pilot training programs. The air shimmered with holograms of warships, fighter squadrons, and maneuver statistics as alien dignitaries exchanged notes and commentary. In the middle of the chamber, the representatives of humanity sat in a small cluster, their uniforms plain compared to the elaborate ceremonial robes and glowing armor of the others. The humans looked calm, but they could hear the laughter, the whispers, the ridicule that never seemed to fade whenever the topic of human pilots was raised. The chairman of the session, a tall insectoid with shining green carapace, tapped his claw against the console and brought up a series of holographic charts. With an almost amused tone, he began to read aloud the comparative survival rates of pilot cadets from different worlds. Species after species appeared with high marks in discipline and formation accuracy. When the human results were shown, the chamber erupted in laughter. The numbers seemed chaotic. Human pilots did not stay in line. They failed formation tests, and they broke command instructions in simulations. To the other species, this was proof of recklessness and undisciplined training. One delegate from the Ithari, whose ships were famous for flying in perfect diamond patterns, sneered openly and declared that humans should never be trusted with starfighters because they would crash before even reaching the battlefield. The human representative, Commander Elias Grant, stood when the laughter grew too strong to ignore. His voice carried across the hall with a sharp edge that silenced a few of the louder voices. He reminded the council that statistics were not the whole story, that survival was not always about sticking to the plan, and that in real battles, humans had time and again pulled off maneuvers that saved not only themselves but their allies. He spoke of battles during first contact skirmishes when human pilots made choices that seemed suicidal, yet turned impossible defeats into survival. But his words were met with more mockery. Another alien leader asked whether humanity considered chaos a military doctrine. The chamber erupted again. This time, with cruel amusement, Elias clenched his fists, but he did not lose his calm. He knew that arguing here would do little. The prejudice against human pilots had grown for decades. Whenever an alien commander saw the recordings of human flying, they shook their heads in disbelief. Humans rolled their ships when there was no reason. They reverse thrust in crowded battlefields. They cut through debris fields instead of flying around them. To aliens who valued precision and predictability, it looked like madness. To humans, it was instinct and adaptability. Yet this difference in philosophy had painted humanity as a race of dangerous fools in cockpits. Even allies questioned why. Earth continued to allow such behavior. As the debate continued, more delegates joined in to tear down the reputation of human pilots. Some demanded that humanity be barred from future flight competitions. Others laughed that perhaps humans were better suited to being passengers rather than pilots. Every insult was recorded by the council's media drones and broadcast across the chamber. Elias felt the sting not just for himself, but for every young cadet back on Earth who dreamed of proving themselves in the stars. He thought of them sitting in simulators, pushing themselves to the limit, being told again and again that the galaxy thought them reckless. The insult was deeper than statistics. It was an attack on their very spirit. Finally, the chairman declared that if humanity wished to defend its reputation, then it should do so in the upcoming interstellar simulation trials. Every species would be represented, every pilot school tested under equal conditions, and results would be shared across the galaxy. The aliens laughed again because they believed they had set a trap. In their minds, humans would enter the trials and fail spectacularly, proving once and for all that their style of flying was nothing but madness. But Elias smiled quietly, for he knew something they did not. He knew that in simulations where chaos ruled and instincts mattered most, humans would shine brighter than any alien dared to imagine. As the council dismissed the assembly, the humans walked out under the weight of 1,000 mocking eyes. Yet beneath the surface of that ridicule there was a spark beginning to grow. For every insult hurled that day, determination was born among human pilots to prove the galaxy wrong. They would step into the simulation not as clowns of the stars, but as warriors who thrived where others hesitated. They would show that recklessness was only another word for courage when courage was needed most. And when the time came, The galaxy would learn to respect the pilots it once laughed at. Humanity's reputation. When the assembly ended, the story of human recklessness spread once more across the stars. News networks replayed the laughter from the council chamber, and countless commentators echoed the same message that humans could not be trusted in the cockpit of a starship. In the great academies of the core worlds, cadets from dozens of species traded jokes about the Terrans, calling them gamblers of the skies and suicidals with wings. Yet on Earth itself the story sounded different. For among the people of humanity, the laughter of the aliens became fuel for a deeper fire Earth's history. A flight was one of daring and courage. From the fragile machines of early aviators to the roaring engines of jet fighters and the starships that now pierced the void, human pilots had always danced on the edge of disaster. They were taught from childhood that machines could break, sensors could fail, and orders could be wrong. But a human pilot with instinct could still survive. It was a philosophy born from centuries of facing danger, with little more than courage and quick decisions. Where other species built traditions of strict order and mathematical predictability, humanity embraced the chaos of the unknown. It was not that humans lacked discipline. It was that their discipline was different, built not on memorizing perfect formations but on adapting to every wild twist the universe could throw. Commander Elias Grant remembered the earliest days of interstellar flight when human explorers had first joined the galactic network. The first clashes with pirates and border raiders had been chaotic affairs where alien captains expected neat formations and steady command. Yet in those moments it was the humans who darted into the storm, breaking formation to intercept raiders, risking collision to block enemy shots, pulling maneuvers that looked insane yet saved whole convoys. The aliens never forgot the recordings, but where humanity saw proof of bravery and skill, the galaxy saw undisciplined madness. The label of reckless was stamped upon humanity before they had even secured their first trade routes. Young cadets on Earth grew up with that reputation haunting their dreams. Every simulation they entered carried the weight of alien judgment. They knew the council thought of them as fools, yet they kept pushing their limits. In the underground halls of the Luna Flight Academy, instructors told their students that the galaxy would never give them respect until they took it for themselves. And so the cadets trained harder than any. They simulated engines stalling, sensors blacking out, wings breaking apart. They pushed their ships into debris storms and asteroid belts. They forced themselves to fly through chaos so that when true battle came, they would be ready. They were reckless in practice because practice was the place to burn away fear. Among the humans there was pride in this reputation, even if outsiders mocked it. Veterans of earlier wars wore it like a badge. Old pilots told stories of desperate missions where only a reckless choice had saved their comrades. They told of rolling their ships between enemy cruisers, of diving into plasma storms, of flying blind through nebulae. To them, recklessness was not stupidity, but the refusal to surrender when every safe option was gone. A human who lived through such maneuvers did not call them reckless. They called them survival. In the weeks after the council session, the announcement of the interstellar simulation trials became headline news. Every species prepared to demonstrate its discipline and skill. The Athari trained their squadrons to fly tighter than ever. The Trallan designed complex formation algorithms to predict enemy moves. The Veyron practiced coordinated energy bursts in flawless harmony. All across the galaxy, pilots drilled endlessly on precision and unity. Yet on Earth, the training took a different tone. Instead of sharpening formations, the instructors demanded chaos scenarios. Instead of perfect obedience, they encouraged creativity. They wanted their pilots to think faster than the simulation itself. They told their cadets that the galaxy already saw them as clowns, so the only way to change that story was to surprise everyone so completely that laughter turned to silence. Elias visited the academies during this time and saw the determination in the eyes of young pilots. He saw the way they pushed their ships through impossible obstacle courses, the way they trusted not in computer models, but in human instinct. He listened to their conversations late at night, where they spoke of dreams not just of winning a trial, but of proving to the universe that humanity belonged among the stars as equals. Each cadet carried a piece of the burden of humiliation that had been thrown upon humanity, and each swore to cast it back in the face of the galaxy with victory. The more the aliens mocked, the more determined humanity became. The galactic commentators could not see it, but something powerful was growing inside the human spirit. It was the same force that had driven them to climb mountains and cross oceans in their ancient history, the same will that had carried them into space when the stars still seemed unreachable. Reckless or not, humanity had always thrived in the face of doubt, and now the greatest trial of their reputation was coming. They would not shy from it. They would meet it head on. The challenge. The announcement of the simulation trials spread across the galaxy like wildfire, and it was spoken of in military academies, trading ports, and even in the private halls of noble houses, because this was more than a contest. It was a stage upon which entire civilizations would display their skill and discipline. The Galactic Council wanted to prove once and for all which species produced the finest pilots in the stars, and every academy prepared its best cadets to stand before the galaxy. For most, it was an opportunity to show off polished skills, but for humanity, it was a chance at redemption. No one believed the humans could stand against the best of the galaxy, but the humans believed differently. On Earth, the announcement was received with fierce determination. At the Luna Academy, the instructors gathered the cadets in the great training dome where the stars of the galaxy were projected in vast holograms above them. Commander Elias Grant stood before the young men and women who would carry the burden of proving humanity's worth. He spoke with a steady voice that carried through the hall and told them that this was their moment. He reminded them that the galaxy laughed at them and called them reckless, that every alien believed humanity would fall in disgrace before the simulations were finished. He told them that they would not fight only for themselves, but for every pilot who had ever been mocked and doubted. He told them they would show the galaxy that courage could not be measured by alien charts and that instinct could not be mocked away. The training that followed was unlike anything the aliens could imagine. While other academies drilled their pilots in neat formations and repeated tactical patterns, the humans embraced chaos. They threw their cadets into simulations where engines exploded without warning, where asteroids rained down from every angle, where enemies appeared from blind spots without logic or predictability. They trained them to react, to improvise, to trust their instincts. They taught them to break away from the false safety of rules when survival demanded something new. Day after day, the cadets flew through storms of data, pushing themselves beyond exhaustion, learning to see opportunities in chaos where others saw only disaster. Whispers spread across the galactic channels that the humans were wasting their time. Analysts predicted that in the first stage of the trial, humanity would be eliminated, that their unpredictable methods would collapse when measured against the discipline of species like the Ithari or the Trellin. Some commentators suggested humanity should not even bother to attend because their failure was guaranteed. Yet the humans prepared in silence. They had no interest in convincing the galaxy with words. They would let the results speak when the time came. The rules of the simulation trial were set by the council. Each academy would send a squadron of its best cadets to compete in a series of scenarios that grew harder with each stage. At first there would be simple obstacle runs, then formation drills, then coordinated assaults, and finally full fleet battles designed by the most advanced tactical minds of the galaxy. Every move would be recorded and broadcast. Victory would bring honor to the academy, but more importantly, it would shape the reputation of an entire species. The humans knew that if they failed, they would not simply lose a contest, they would lose whatever small respect remained for their kind. When the roster of academies was revealed, the scale of the challenge became clear. The Ithari sent a squadron of their flawless diamond formation flyers. The Trellin arrived with pilots trained to follow their predictive algorithms that could calculate enemy actions before they occurred. The Veyron fielded warriors who synchronized, their ships as though controlled by a single mind. Dozens of other species sent their finest, each with polished traditions stretching back centuries. Then came the humans, the youngest of the starfaring races, with cadets barely out of training who carried nothing but determination and the burning need to prove themselves. As the date of the trials drew near, the galaxy waited with anticipation. The networks played endless replays of alien formations slicing through simulations with perfection, while they laughed at the idea of humans surviving past the first test. Commentators placed wagers not on if the humans would fail, but on how quickly Yet within the halls of Earth's academies, the cadets sharpened their instincts and prepared themselves for the unknown. They did not care for the laughter or the wagers. They had heard it all before. What mattered now was the chance to show the truth. Humanity would not run from the challenge. They would step into the storm and make it their own. The first flights, the day of the trials arrived, and the Galactic Council's grand simulation arena flickered to life above a vast station in neutral space. Every academy had gathered with their proud banners and their polished squadrons, while millions across the galaxy tuned into the broadcasts. The arena was no ordinary simulation. It was a construct of living holograms that replicated space with frightening accuracy. Every asteroid field, every warship hull, every burst of plasma fire was generated so perfectly that even experienced pilots sometimes forgot they were not in real combat. It was the stage upon which reputations would rise or collapse. The first phase was designed to be simple, an obstacle run through a twisting canyon of asteroids and energy storms. The Ithari squadron was called first, and their ships slid into the arena in perfect diamond formation. With flawless synchronization, they weaved through the rocks, never colliding, never straying from their pattern, each movement calculated. By centuries of tradition, the crowd of alien dignitaries cheered loudly, praising the precision and beauty of their flight. Commentators declared that the Ithari had set the standard for the competition, and that no one would match their elegance. Next came the Trillin pilots. Guided by predictive algorithms, they adjusted to each asteroid before it appeared on sensors, twisting as if the future itself bent to their will. The crowd marveled at the display of intellect and control. Other academies followed, each demonstrating control, coordination, and obedience to command. Every performance was met with applause and approving murmurs. The galaxy expected nothing less. Then at last it was humanity's turn. The human squadron entered the arena in silence. Their ships were older models compared to some of the sleek alien craft. They formed no neat diamond, no practiced shape, just a loose scattering of fighters. Laughter spread across the chamber before they even began. Commentators whispered that the humans had already failed before moving a single kilometer. But then, the signal to start came, and the human squadron dove into the asteroid canyon. What followed was unlike anything the audience had seen. Instead of maintaining a fixed path, each human fighter darted in a different direction. One pilot spiraled through a narrow gap sideways. Another flipped thrusters to slide backward between two spinning boulders. Another shot straight into a plasma storm only to burst out the other side with hull shields flaring. To the alien eye it was chaos, a storm of disobedience. Yet the chaos had rhythm, because no ship collided, no pilot hesitated, and every risk seemed impossibly calculated by instinct. The crowd gasped when one human fighter clipped the edge of a rock, spun out of control, then corrected the spin in a maneuver no alien simulator had ever predicted. Laughter died away as the squadron continued, reckless yet unbroken by the end. Of the course, every human ship emerged intact, and though their path looked wild compared to the smooth alien formations, the time clock showed the truth. The humans had finished the course faster than every other squadron. The arena was silent for a heartbeat before angry voices rose. Alien commentators dismissed it as luck. Some accused the humans of breaking unspoken codes of discipline. Yet, deep in the silence before the protests, one thing was clear. Humanity had not failed. They had stunned the galaxy by surviving and excelling where no one thought they could. The second phase of the trials followed swiftly. This time, the squadrons were ordered to form tight escort patterns around cargo vessels and protect them from simulated pirate attacks. Once again, the alien species displayed flawless unity, moving their ships like machine parts in a great engine. The pirates were defeated, but in rigid ways that followed predictable strategies. When humanity's turn came, the pirate simulation doubled in aggression, as if the program itself sought to punish them. But the humans reacted in ways no algorithm could foresee. They broke formation at once, each fighter darting on its own, striking pirates from unexpected angles, then converging suddenly to form shields around the cargo before scattering again. To outsiders it looked disorganized, yet the pirate simulation could not adapt. Within minutes, every pirate ship was destroyed and the cargo was safe. This time the applause was hesitant. No one could deny the results, but pride forced many to sneer. Commentators struggled to explain it, saying that such tactics could never work in real war. Yet more and more voices in the crowd began to whisper that perhaps there was something in human flying that they had ignored. Some of the younger cadets from other species even stared with wide eyes, secretly admiring the raw courage they had witnessed. For humanity, the first flights were only the beginning. They had not come to impress with beauty or elegance. They had come to show the galaxy that instinct and courage could achieve, what rules could not. And though the galaxy tried to dismiss them, the seed of doubt had been planted. If this was only the first stage, what might come when the simulations grew harder, chaos as a weapon? The galaxy had expected the humans to stumble and fail in the opening stages, but instead they had finished with times and results that rivaled or even surpassed the finest academies. The council could not erase the scoreboard, and so the numbers were displayed for all to see. Yet the dignitaries muttered among themselves and sought excuses. They claimed the course had favored the humans by accident. They said the escort mission was flawed. They said chaos could never triumph in true battle. The humans listened to all of it in silence, knowing the real test was still to come. The third phase would be combat simulations between squadrons, and this was where alien species expected humanity's madness to collapse completely. When the day came, the arena lit up again with vast starscapes and battlefields drawn in glowing detail. The first matches pitted alien academies against each other, and the spectacle dazzled the audience. The Ithari flew in flawless diamond wings, their formations unbroken even when simulated missiles screamed toward them. The Traylan executed maneuvers predicted by their algorithms with uncanny foresight, avoiding traps before they were sprung. The Varen unleashed synchronized barrages that looked like walls of fire sweeping across the void. The crowd roared with approval, convinced that this was the true standard of mastery. Then it was time for the humans to face their first opponent. Their squadron of cadets, clad in plain flight suits, entered the simulation to meet a group of Jernathi pilots, known for their iron discipline. The Jernathi ships moved like a living wall, shields overlapping and weapons firing in perfect rhythm. Against such unity, most believed the human squadron would be crushed in minutes. At the signal, the battle began, and for the first few moments the prediction seemed correct. The Jernathi advanced as one, their firepower heavy and their defenses tight. But then the humans moved. Instead of matching formation with formation, they shattered their own line instantly, scattering into every direction. One human fighter dived straight through the Jernathi center, drawing fire and forcing them to break ranks. Another looped around an asteroid field and struck from behind. A third shut down power for a moment, drifting like debris before lighting engines and striking at close range. The Jernathi commanders shouted in disbelief as their perfect wall began to crumble under attacks they had never trained for. Their unity had become weakness because they could not adapt to the wild storm of human movement. Within minutes, the human squadron had torn gaps through their defense and claimed victory. The arena was stunned into silence before shouts and gasps filled the air. Alien commentators tried to dismiss it again, saying the Jernathi had been careless, yet the truth was plain. The humans had turned chaos into a weapon. Their so-called recklessness had dismantled one of the most disciplined formations in the galaxy. Rumors spread across the viewing halls and into the civilian networks. Pilots everywhere replayed the simulation, unable to believe what they had seen. Some called it luck, but others began to whisper that perhaps there was genius in the madness. After all, the humans did not stop there. In the following rounds, they faced species after species, each with its own traditions and tactics. Against the Ithari, their chaotic maneuvers forced the diamond formation to scatter, leaving individual ships exposed. Against the Traylan, their unpredictability rendered predictive algorithms useless, for no machine could calculate decisions made in the heat of instinct. Against the Varen, they darted between the walls of fire, using their own energy bursts as cover for ambushes. Each battle ended with outcomes that no alien strategist had foreseen. Each battle left the crowd more divided between disbelief and reluctant awe. For the human cadets, these victories were not only triumphs of skill, but vindication of their years of training under ridicule. They knew every twist of their flight would be called reckless, but they also knew every twist brought them closer to proving that recklessness was another word for survival when the void turned hostile. Commander Elias Grant watched from the sidelines and felt pride swell in his chest as he saw cadets he had once instructed perform miracles in the arena. They were no longer just defending humanity's honor. They were rewriting the rules of what it meant to be a pilot. By the time the third phase ended, humans were no longer an afterthought. They had become the storm everyone feared to face. The scoreboard showed their victories clear as day, and though many voices still tried to explain it away, no one could ignore the pattern. Humanity was not surviving by chance. They were winning, because chaos in their hands had become a blade sharper than any formation. And as whispers spread through the chambers, some council members began to fear what such pilots might do in real war, where the stakes were not pride but survival of entire fleets. The humans had turned the insult of recklessness into a weapon of respect. The galaxy could laugh no longer, for laughter had been replaced with unease. The trials were far from over, but already humanity had shown that they were not clowns of the stars. They were predators who thrived in chaos, and chaos was waiting in the battles to come. The breaking point. The Council had thought the third phase would expose humanity, but instead, it became the stage for their rise, and with each round of victory, the unease in the chamber grew heavier. The scoreboard did not lie. Human cadets had defeated opponents who were considered untouchable. Commentators who once mocked them now struggled to explain away what the galaxy had witnessed. Some insisted it was a fluke. Others whispered that perhaps the simulation itself was flawed. Yet none could deny the sight of Jernathi walls collapsing, or Ithari diamonds shattering against the storm of human instinct. The galaxy had expected a spectacle of failure, and instead had seen the birth of a legend. Now the fourth phase of the trials approached, and this time the simulations were designed not for single squadrons, but for fleet coordination. The arena would pit entire wings of fighters alongside frigates and escorts in full-scale battle scenarios. This was the breaking point where most academies stumbled, because the challenge required not only individual skill, but also unity across dozens of ships. The alien academies prepared with confidence because they believed their discipline and centuries of doctrine would ensure victory. Humanity entered with quiet determination, knowing that the galaxy was waiting for them to finally falter. The first fleet battle simulation placed the human squadron against a coalition of two academies working in concert. The holographic arena filled with stars and enemy frigates while fighters poured out like streams of light. The coalition moved with precision, wings interlocking and escorts covering their larger ships with overlapping shields. Against such coordination, most expected the humans to scatter and fail. Yet what followed was chaos refined into art. The human fighters broke formation at once, darting into gaps so small no alien dared to attempt them. They forced the coalition to shift constantly, breaking their perfect rhythm. Then the human cadets turned desperation into weaponry. One pilot feigned a reactor failure, drifting helplessly until the enemy broke formation to target him, at which point the pilot reignited engines and cut deep into their flank. Another dragged enemy fighters into the path of their own frigate's fire. By the time the simulation ended, the coalition lay in pieces and the human fleet stood victorious. The crowd erupted with uproar. Some shouted accusations of cheating while others sat in silence, unable to understand how chaos had defeated order yet again. The council members exchanged troubled glances. They had meant this phase to humble the humans, but instead it had magnified their reputation. The recording spread faster than any denial could stop them, and across the galaxy young pilots replayed the battles again and again, studying every insane maneuver. They began to see patterns in the madness, patterns that spoke of instinct sharpened by a lifetime of fighting against impossible odds. The next simulations grew even harder. The humans faced overwhelming numbers, scenarios designed to crush even the most disciplined wings. Yet the cadets thrived in the impossible. They turned debris fields into traps, flying through clouds of shattered ships where sensors failed, emerging from the chaos to strike like predators. They used sudden bursts of speed to break formations that relied on predictability. They even sacrificed their own safety in daring feints that created openings for allies to strike. What looked reckless was in truth calculated courage, and again the humans emerged victorious. As each battle concluded, the voices of doubt turned to whispers of fear. Council leaders who had laughed weeks earlier now sat in silence as they imagined what such pilots might do in real war. If a handful of cadets could dismantle the pride of ancient academies, what would fleets of seasoned human veterans accomplish in the battlefield? The thought unsettled them more than they dared to admit. Among the human cadets there was no arrogance, only determination. They remembered the years of ridicule, and they flew with the weight of that memory. Every maneuver was a statement to the galaxy that humanity would no longer bow to mockery. Commander Elias Grant watched them with pride, his heart swelling as he realized they were no longer merely cadets. They had become warriors who embodied the very spirit of humanity, the refusal to yield even when the universe declared them beaten. He knew the galaxy was beginning to see it too, though many still tried to hide it behind scorn. By the end of the fourth phase, the humans stood undefeated, and the council chamber had fallen into uneasy silence. What had begun as laughter had transformed into fear cloaked in politeness. The breaking point had come, not for humanity, but for the galaxy itself. They had been forced to see that the storm they mocked as recklessness was in truth a power none of them possessed. The humans were not just surviving the trials, they were reshaping them, and as the final stage approached, the galaxy braced itself for what was coming. If the humans thrived in chaos, then the ultimate unwinnable scenario that awaited them might reveal whether chaos itself had limits or whether humanity had truly become the deadliest pilots among the stars. The final revelation. The Council had saved the most difficult simulation for last. It was designed not to test skill but to crush hope. No academy had ever completed it without total failure. The program was known among pilots as the unwinnable trial. Whole fleets would be outnumbered and trapped in a scenario where every logical path ended in destruction. The Council believed this would finally silence humanity. They expected the human squadron to fall apart, to prove once and for all that chaos could not stand against overwhelming odds. The chamber was filled to capacity as dignitaries from every world gathered to see the conclusion. Across the galaxy, billions tuned in to watch what they believed would be the humiliation of Earth. The simulation began in darkness. Human cadets sat within their ships as the stars of the holographic battlefield came to life. Enemy fleets appeared from all directions, cruisers and carriers unleashing wave after wave of fighters. The odds were so heavy that even the most disciplined academies had once been annihilated before reaching the halfway mark. For a brief moment, silence filled the human comms. Then Commander Elias Grant's voice broke through. He reminded them of every insult they had endured, of every laugh thrown at their expense, of every time they had been told they did not belong. He told them that this was the moment to show the galaxy who they truly were. His words carried not the cold tone of command but the fire of belief. The cadets answered as one. They would not retreat. They would fight. The enemy squadrons closed in and the humans scattered into chaos. They did not form a defensive wall or a retreating arc. They became a storm. One fighter spiraled straight through the first wave, guns blazing, scattering the enemy formation. Another cut engines and drifted close to a cruiser's hull before reigniting thrusters and blasting it point blank. Others wove through enemy fire so recklessly that alien spectators gasped in disbelief. Yet through the madness a pattern emerged. Each daring move opened a door for another pilot. Each reckless dive created space for the fleet to maneuver. What looked suicidal became survival. What looked like chaos became victory. The Council watched in stunned silence as human cadets destroyed the first wave. But the simulation grew crueler. More fleets appeared, larger and faster. The humans were driven back into a minefield designed to crush them. Any other academy would have crumbled, but the humans used the danger as weapon. They lured enemy fighters into the mines, triggering explosions that tore apart ships in clusters. They used the debris as cover, weaving through it with instinct that no algorithm could match. The audience no longer laughed. They leaned forward in their seats. With disbelief written on every face, the simulation escalated to its final stage. The humans were surrounded by fleets so vast that even their chaos seemed powerless. Ammunition was nearly gone, shields failing, engines burning. The crowd whispered that it was over, but the cadets refused to yield. In the silence of their comms, Elias spoke again. He told them humanity had never survived by playing safe, that their history was written by those who dared when others surrendered. He told them that if they must fall, then they would fall in such a way that the galaxy would never forget. The cadets answered not with words but with action. They turned their fighters toward the heart of the enemy fleet. Engines screamed as they pushed beyond safety, beyond limits. They dived through walls of fire, twisting, rolling, colliding with precision that defied logic. Enemy ships tried to adjust, but the chaos was too much. The humans struck the central command vessel, sacrificing their last shields to drive deep into its core. The simulation blazed with fire as the enemy fleet collapsed. When the light cleared, the humans stood battered but alive. Against all odds, against every prediction, they had won the unwinnable. The arena erupted. Some shouted in anger, others in awe. The scoreboard declared the truth. Humanity had not only survived every phase, they had triumphed where no one else had ever succeeded. The Council could not deny it. Their attempt to shame humanity had turned into humanity's greatest victory. Across the galaxy, the broadcasts replayed the final moments again and again. The images of human fighters cutting through impossible odds becoming legend. The words, reckless and undisciplined, no longer sounded like insults. They sounded like warning. Elias Grant stood before the Council when the trial ended. He did not speak with arrogance. He simply said that humanity had been mocked for too long, but now the galaxy had seen the truth. Humans thrived in chaos, and chaos was the nature of war. The chamber was silent. No laughter remained. Respect had been forced upon them, and deep inside many of the counselors there was fear, for they realized that in the future when true wars came, it would be humanity leading the charge, unpredictable, unstoppable, and unafraid. The cadets returned to their ships in silence, exhausted, but proud. They knew the galaxy would never look at them the same again. What began with mockery had ended with revelation. Humanity had claimed its place among the stars, not with elegance or perfection, but with courage and instinct that no other race could match. From that day forward, no one would call them reckless without remembering the trials where they turned chaos into victory. And so the legend of humanity's pilots was born, a legend that would echo through the stars for generations. The final revelation. The Council prepared the last stage with confidence that at last humanity would be humbled because this simulation had broken every academy that faced it before. It was called the unwinnable trial, a battle designed so that, no matter the choice, a fleet would be surrounded and crushed. The chamber was full, every delegate ready to laugh one final time at the reckless humans. Across the galaxy, billions waited, believing they would see Earth's pilots fail. The human cadets entered the arena with steady hearts. They had endured laughter and insults since the first day of the trials, but they had also turned every stage into victory. Now they carried the weight of humanity's reputation into the most impossible fight. Commander Elias Grant's voice filled their comms, reminding them that this was their chance to show the galaxy the truth of what it meant to be human. He told them not to fly as the aliens expected, but as they had always flown, with instinct, courage, and the refusal to yield. The simulation unleashed its fury. Enemy fleets materialized on every side, cruisers and carriers pouring out endless waves of fighters. The human cadets scattered at once, weaving through fire, diving into the heart of enemy lines. One pilot shut down engines and drifted like space junk until the enemy drew near, before reigniting thrusters and tearing into their formation. Another lured ships into a collapsing minefield, turning the enemy's trap into a weapon. Everywhere, the humans fought with reckless brilliance, and everywhere the enemy fell into disarray. The crowd that had come to mock sat in silence. They could not deny what their own eyes saw. Chaos had become weapon, instinct had become shield, and the humans who were supposed to fall in disgrace were instead breaking the very trial designed to destroy them. The simulation escalated, more fleets arriving, the battlefield filling with fire, yet the cadets pushed on. Shields failed, Ammunition ran dry, but still they fought. They used debris as cover. They turned failed systems into desperate tricks. They made every impossible moment into survival. At last the program unleashed its final cruelty. A colossal command vessel appeared, shielded by layers of defenders. Even the alien academies that had once attempted this trial had never come close to breaching it. The humans were exhausted, their ships battered, yet Elias gave a single order to strike. They did not hesitate. Engines roared as they hurled themselves into the storm. They wove between enemy fire with precision born of instinct. They cut through defenders with feints that seemed suicidal, but opened paths to the core. Together they dove into the heart of the enemy fleet and shattered the command vessel in a final blaze of light. When the simulation cleared, the humans remained standing, scarred but alive. The chamber was silent, before erupting in disbelief. Delegates shouted that it was impossible. Others demanded the program be checked for error, but the scoreboard did not lie. Humanity had triumphed in the unwinnable trial. Across the galaxy, the recordings spread, and for the first time the word reckless carried no insult. It carried fear and respect. The Council had tried to humiliate humanity, and instead had revealed their greatest strength. They thrived where order collapsed. They endured where logic failed. They turned chaos into victory. Elias stood before the chamber when it ended. He did not boast. He simply said that humanity had been mocked long enough, but now the truth was clear. In war, the void never played fair, and only those who dared could survive. The galaxy had seen who the true pilots were. No laughter followed his words. The Council sat in silence, for they knew what they had witnessed would echo through history. The cadets returned to their ships, knowing they had changed everything. What began with mockery ended with revelation. Humanity had claimed its place, not with elegance but with courage and instinct beyond measure. The galaxy would never forget the day the reckless became the legends of the stars, the end